Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today, we're discussing Star Wars Maul Shadow Lord, the latest animated Star Wars series on Disney+. Now, if you have spent any time in the nerdier corners of the internet these past few weeks, then you already know that Star Wars fans and critics love this show. It had a perfect 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for weeks. Now that I'm all caught up on the series, I gotta say, I am not surprised. It is great, and it looks extraordinary on Disney Plus in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. The animation is dazzling and stylistic, and the sound work can absolutely hold its own along with the films, TV shows, and video games from the Star Wars canon. In full disclosure, I know a thing or two about the Star Wars canon, as I used to be the vice president and general manager of Skywalker Sound. So when they reached out to do an episode on the sound of the series, I could not wait to do it. Joining us today on the show is Brad Rau, the supervising director and executive producer of the show, along with two-time Emmy Award nominee David Collins, who is the show's sound designer, re-recording mixer, and supervising sound editor, as well as one of the voice actors. And speaking of actors, I'm also thrilled to welcome consulting producer and the literal star of the show, Sam Witwer. Yes, Maul himself. Sam has voiced the character for almost 15 years now and is also a certified Star Wars superfan, so he knows a thing or two about the hero of this show. Now, I've known David Collins since he was an intern at Skywalker Sound in 1999, and I met Sam when I gave him a tour of the ranch, probably sometime around 2008. So it was great to see them and to meet Brad, and we really had a fun time talking all this Star Wars and Skywalker stuff, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Here's my conversation with Sam Witwer, Brad Rau, and David Collins. Thank you guys for coming on the Dolby podcast today to talk about Star Wars Maul Shadow Lord. This is such a fun show. First question I have is for Sam, for you. So there are really three big Star Wars villains that fans are obsessed over. You got Darth Vader, you got dope Boba Fett, and then of course Maul. And, I remember we were talking before we rolled, like my first day at Skywalker Sound was opening day from Phantom Menace. And in that movie, Darth Maul is this kind of mystic physical presence. He only has a handful of lines. But when you came in and took over this character, you really had to give him a psychology and a backstory to explain his motivations. So I'm just curious, how did you approach Maul and turning him from an icon into an actual character with depth and complexity?
Well, it all comes from George. George had an idea that he wanted to bring Maul back. And then Dave called me up and said, "Can you do that?" Essentially, he said, "I need Maul. Can you do it?" Which was very carefully worded. If you think about, it's not, "Hey, do you want to play Darth Maul?" It was, "I need Darth Maul. Can you do it?" And I lied. I said, "Sure, I can do that. No problem. I could do it right now. I just don't feel like it." So me and Dave talked for months before we recorded a single line, and we talked about all kinds of literature characters and film characters that we thought we could draw from, that we thought were particularly successful, like Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. We're like, yeah, there's something we can draw from there. And Dave said, what about Gollum? And I'm like, oh, interesting. So there's no Gollum without Smeagol, though. So are you saying what I think? He's like, yeah, I'm thinking there's some vulnerability. Oh, interesting. And then we talked about Khan from Star Trek and how absolutely convinced of his righteousness he is. And so really we just started sketching in a portrait of who this guy was. And Dave never told me what the character needed to sound like. He just thought if we are agreeing in who this guy is, it'll sound right. Which was, no pressure for a young voice. I was very new to voice acting back then. I was only a live action guy at that point. So just a little frightening. I think it was a frightening experience because, you don't want to get this stuff wrong.
And there are certainly fans who will be vocal about it if they don't like where things are headed. But this show is so popular, and I think part of that is just really about, this is so much more of a complex portrayal of Maul than we've ever seen before, and especially in this series, it takes it so much further. It's obviously we know him as a rage-filled, terrifying villain, but you also imbue him with a lot of humanity in this series specifically. So tell me a little bit about finding like the humanity of the man without softening the monster of Maul.
And me and Brad talked about this endlessly, that there's a person in there behind that scary makeup and the horns and all that. There's a person who has as rich and functional of emotional machinery as you or I do, and he's all of the feelings that we feel. But the only tools he has to express himself are supervillain tools that were given to him by the Emperor from Star Wars, the guy who raised him. So that creates a really fun and interesting inner conflict. That's really where it all comes from. He's, to a very real extent, he's a man at war with himself, trying to navigate this world as conscientiously as he can. But between his good intentions and his actions, there's a wide gulf. It's so wide, in fact, that can be the difference between good and evil.
Brad, I'd love to, for you to weigh in on kind of the development of that character complexity. And also just, I mean, quite frankly, for our audience who may not be familiar, your role is as the supervising director on the show. So what does a supervising director do, and how do you work with Sam on these character development issues?
Like Sam said, we talk all the time. We talk about it. There's sort of this conception that, Sam's got the cans on in the booth and I'm pointing or something and Sam's doing all this cool stuff. But we talk so much. We spend so much more time talking about the character ahead of time, especially when Dave Filoni and Matt Miknovitz were developing the show, the early days when they were talking to me and then bringing Sam in, and we all started talking about it really, really early on. Sam just mentioned the vulnerability of Maul from the early days. That's one thing we really wanted to expand on in the show. How do we show this guy both at the height of his glory, and yet how can we show the vulnerabilities more than we have? And that was really challenging and hard to find. It wasn't just, oh yeah, we're just going to do this. Great. We kept reevaluating and going back to episodes and opening things up. Athena Portillo, our amazing producer, had the foresight to hold budget and schedule back to allow us to just continually look for what the truth of it was, which is a beautiful and a very difficult thing. And in my role as supervising director, really, I consider it the luckiest job around, because I get to work with these two guys who are incredible, and our whole team is so, so good. I think of it as me being in front of the lines with the sword and the torch, and I'm just screaming and running in this direction. And if I can get everybody to follow me, we can do great things. If we're all going in the same direction, that's really my job, just getting everybody going in the same direction.
But you also direct the voice recording sessions, right, for the entire series. So tell me about having Sam in the booth. Tell me about getting that performance out of him. And like, do you have to torture him to get there, or tell us about that process? It's
incredible. And we have a co-voice director, Mr. Sam Riegel, who joins us. Love Sam. We've worked with him for a long, long time. And we just have a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. But I think of it as all these discussions we do ahead of time to prep ourselves for what we're going to do on the day in the booth, because the clock is ticking. There's literally a time code clock. You can see the dollars going by. So we got to be on it. We got to be moving. Sam is the best. Don't tell him I said so. Sam is the best. We're always surprised with what you do. Like we'll have an idea for how something might go, and everybody has in their mind sort of how a cadence might go, literally a stress in a line or something like that. And Sam will bring these surprising, interesting things to the table, and I'm just looking at head writer Matt Miknovitz, looking at Athena Portillo. We're like, oh my goodness, this is the gold. This is great. It's a joy to work with Sam, because we not only get an incredible performance, nuanced performance for Maul, but he's also so generous with the other cast members. There are numerous occasions where he's not on the call sheet, and he will still come to the studio to be there to read with his fellow cast members. He's a true team leader, and they rely on him. We have an incredible cast, and some of them are new to voice acting when the show started, and having someone like Witwer there who's done that exact journey, who's been on that journey of going from live action to voice acting. He'll give little tips, he'll augment the direction that I'm giving and sort of help them see their way through the scenes. And you could just see they just hang on to him for dear life, and everybody's so appreciative of that. And that's an incredible thing. It's not normal.
So Sam, I wanted to ask you a little bit about those recording sessions, because as you said, your background was in live action before, becoming a voice actor. And this performance is so I mean, it feels funny to call it a physical performance, but there's so much. Tell me about your process of being in the booth. Like, are you just standing there with cans on in front of a microphone and not moving around? Or like, because you imbue it with so much physicality. It sounds like so much physicality in your voice.
Brad gives all the actors just such a wide latitude to do whatever it is that we need to do. He'll literally let me retreat to a corner and scream and cry and shout and then jump in front of the mic. And he's like, okay. And then the lines start happening. But yeah, it's definitely a physical commitment. And I think that what helps us really create that character the way that you see him on the screen is the fact that Brad and Keith Kellogg and the animators, we're all in communication. So Brad knows when something might play more visually, so I know when there's sort of a real dance happening, because Brad will show an animatic of the sequence that's extremely detailed. I mean, like really, really well shot and really, really well constructed. And he'll be like, okay, now once we do it, we will redo this. But right now, this is sort of what we're going for. And so it's sort of a little bit of a dance. You hand it off. You pull back on certain moments so that the animators can do something really interesting with his eyes or something like that. And then sometimes maybe the voice needs to come to the forefront. So it's this really interesting dance that we do to create. I don't know, Brad, is that an accurate way of describing it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we set up the animatics, and we have amazing episodic directors on our team. Worth mentioning all three of these guys because they're incredible. Stuart Lee, Saul Ruiz, Nate Villanueva. Beautiful, incredible. All have worked with Dave Filoni for years, all coming from the tree of learning cinematography from George Lucas, literally. It's a beautiful thing. So we have these reels that will show the cast, and it gives us a sense of proximity. We have detailed compositions, all of the lens choices and actions have been figured out. But I always tell Sam and the cast, this is our foundation. And like Sam is saying, we're going to match to you guys. And there are times when Sam will give us a performance that is so shockingly, in the best way, different than what we were thinking, that we go back in and we reshoot that scene to match to what Sam did or anybody in our cast. But Sam, seeing you prepare for those big emotional moments, I mean, speaking of physicality, you're literally jumping up and down, and there's tears on both sides of the booth. There's so much emotion, and I think you can really feel that on screen. It's incredible.
And Brad, tell us a little bit about how you collaborate with David. Like, at what point does David come into the process, and kind of when do you start to, would you give him a shopping list for sound design, or kind of what are those conversations like? Sometimes,
yes. Sometimes we will talk about things that are coming up, way in the future. And I can't wait for David to talk about this stuff. It's so fun. We have the best time. We just have so much fun. It's ridiculous. On this show, knowing it was going to be so serialized, we met a little bit more often, I would say, David, to, as well as bringing in our story editors, Nick Anastasio, Alex Rawlings, amazing guys. And they build in the temp sound design and temp score for all of our animatics that we're talking about. So we usually will talk about those with David, a little bit before he starts working on them. But this is a show where I just spoiled everything. David, here's what's happening. 10 episodes. We need to start working on the sound because it's going to be so different than what we've done before.
Just to zoom way out, in talking about working with Sam and working with Brad, we've been doing this for a long time together. And that's what's funny. The industry goes through changes. The companies go through changes. We're still here, making Star Wars, and we have this past to draw upon over and over and over again. I mean, Sam and I have been best friends for 26 years, something like that.
You guys have a funny backstory, the two of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sam went to college with my best friend and theater partner growing up. And we were introduced early on when Sam was at Juilliard and I had started at Lucas, first Skywalker Sound as an intern, and then Lucas Arts around 2000. And Sam had moved to LA and had started booking shows, all different kinds of things. And then, of course, booked Battlestar Galactica and Dexter and all these different shows. And I was constantly trying to get him in a show. And then The Force Unleashed happened. Sam's audition was incredible. And that was 20 years ago this October, that audition took place. And so then we made The Force Unleashed together, which came out in 2008. Fast forward 10 years later, I'm back at Skywalker Sound and I meet Brad Rau. And Brad is directing Forces of Destiny after having done, Rebels episodes, and then comes on to do a show called The Bad Batch, which was very similar in terms of, thematic sort of clone aberrations and personalities to a game that I had done in 2004 called Star Wars Republic Commando, which had the same themes. It was all something that George had been kind of, doing variations on and experimenting with. And so I lobbied Matthew Wood to get that show. And so then Brad and I did 5 years and 3 seasons on Bad Batch together. So by the time, long story short, by the time we all got to Maul, and by the way, I remember Sam calling me being like, you'll never believe the phone call I just got from Dave Filoni. I keep this to yourself, but he wants me to play Maul, and oh my God, I'm freaking out. We all have been doing this together for a long time. And so when Maul came together, I had this tremendous advantage of knowing both of them, and Brad and I having developed this shorthand on the mix stage. And then playing a role in the show as well also really helps, because I was seeing animatics and scripts and attending cast records, oftentimes a full calendar year before I had to edit, design, and mix an episode. So I had all of this time to think and work with the team, and Nick Anastasio and everyone in the picture department, Athena and everyone. I mean, we were just constantly talking. We did a bonding trip to Japan together to go to Celebration Japan, and we talked the entire time. So by the time we really got into the episodes, we all were kind of hive mind, to use Nick's phrase, on what it is that we were trying to achieve. And we just kind of plowed through the season that way. There was, of course, a lot of experimentation along the way, changes in edits, changes in sounds, changes in music, even changes in dialogue. We actually remixed a few episodes at the top of the season. We had the opportunity to go back and revisit the pilot episode, which is rare, and after we had been a few episodes in, we said, you know what, well, let's go back and plus up a few things. Let's change a couple of lines. Let's change a couple of mix moves. So I actually got to do, polish passes on things along with the rest of the team. And that connection, I think, really is very visible and very audible in the final show.
Can I call something out? Speaking of the hive mind, I had the opportunity to watch these gentlemen work in a mix playback, and I'm sitting back and I see Brad go, I don't know, what do you think, David? This moment, death crystals? And David's like, yeah. And then next thing you know, then David pulls in this weird shimmery stuff in the mid to high range of the spectrum that just really added this sort of magic to the scene. But I just was like, death crystals?
Oh yeah, we had all these weird shorthand names for things. So let's put some bone leather in there. What's bone leather? Oh, that's just the weird sound of the Inquisitors creaking and crackling when they move to just make them feel decrepit and freaky and scary, like, supernatural beings on the hunt. Yeah, there was a lot of that. That's true.
Bone leather. So is that a thing in the Skywalker Sound library now? You can just
it is now.
Bone leather.
Yeah, I got to talk to a librarian and be like, let's label that bone leather in the. That was Brad coined that phrase, I think.
I remember you as an intern on the scoring stage.
I'm so sorry,
because I had you were so fresh faced back in the day. Because obviously that was when I was general manager at Skywalker Sound, but I really became aware of your sound design work through your work at LucasArts on the gaming side, which came after that kind of first internship. So tell us a little bit about like getting your start as a sound designer in the game side and then making that transition back to cinema and television. And what did you learn on the game side that actually kind of informs how you do sound design for episodic work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think everyone's journey through, creative journey through this business is cumulative, and you're constantly learning from what you did in the past. And LucasArts gave me a chance to experiment. It gave me a chance to learn and grow. Games and interactive are obviously very different than linear, but linear is a part of what happens in interactive, particularly with a Star Wars interactive game. But you are basically creating a very complicated synth out of the game engine that is both controlled by and experienced by the player, and that means that you're really banging your head against the walls, particularly in the early 2000s, as to how to get the game to mix itself and how to prevent overlap in dialogue, all kinds of technical things in order to make something that feels cinematic. And I trained as an actor in college and a musician, going to conservatory, that kind of thing. But I loved story. I loved characters. I loved being on stage. And I read way too many plays. I was one of those theater kids, and sang in the choir, all of that. And so, the storytelling in Star Wars and cinema and Skywalker Sound was always a huge draw for me. But I think even at 23, I realized I was amongst some of the greatest filmmakers in the US, if not the world, in that building, in the tech building at Skywalker Ranch. And what LucasArts allowed me to do was not only get my chops up, but it also allowed me a lot of time to listen, because I would get these deliveries from Matthew Wood and from Ben Burtt, and it was my job to go through them all. So by the time I have this shorthand where I just know where everything lives in the library. I know what the file's called. I know what the metadata looks like. And I know how it was used in the film, because I had to catalog our own version of the library in my early 20s back at LucasArts, so I know exactly what the raw material is, and even some of the stems that came from the ranch, and how it's all categorized and where to find it. And that helps me, I think, hopefully be a good steward of all of Ben Burtt's, incredible legacy, and bring that to the drama. I think it also affected my taste in Star Wars, because I want to hear those sounds. I just chase what I want to hear out of my Star Wars after, growing up with it like everyone else did. And I want to, there are times where you make something new and something incredible and awesome, but, really it's about servicing the story and servicing Star Wars and making something that impacts me. So I am going to use that Ben Burtt explosion, and I am going to use classic Maul lightsaber sounds, because it's really important when he's windmilling that saber that I feel the same way I did when I saw The Phantom Menace, and just go, whoa, what was that? Ben Burtt, you're a genius. So that's how LucasArts, I think, really, and those 10 plus years I spent there, affected me, my career, and how it affected the sound of the show.
One of the things I learned at Skywalker is I think the best sound designers tend to have backgrounds as musicians, because they think of sound design in terms of tonality and emotion. So it makes perfect sense that you have not only a musician background, but a performing background as well. Next question, Brad. The look of this show is so distinctive. I'm so in love with the way you handle backgrounds, and sort of how, painterly is the obvious kind of adjective to use to describe it. But even like, Maul's makeup, the way the textures are just so, it's like oil paintings. It's so stunning. I will say, especially in Dolby Vision, streaming on Disney Plus, it looks just amazing. But tell me about developing that visual style of the show, what that opened up for a storytelling perspective. And then David, I'm curious for you, like having that very distinctive visual look, what did that open up for you in terms of the sound design?
Yeah, no, thanks, Glenn. That's awesome compliment. It's something we worked really, really hard at before we had any script lock, before we started shooting anything. And it was Dave Filoni, as it usually is. He was very busy, the busiest guy I know. I don't know how he still has time to give us notes, but he does. We love it. When we were early days talking about this show, really, really early on, he said he wanted to, I know there's been many interviews where we've talked about this, but we're talking about it again. He wanted us to plus everything in every department. He said the script's got to be better. He'll come in and just say a few things, and it changed the whole course of what we were doing. He wanted the designs tighter, the animation, everything better, of course. And we always look to plus every department as we go, but it was a really big kind of flag in the ground moment, a big challenge to me and to the team. And again, Athena Portillo needs all the high five, all the praise for setting us up and pushing us and continuing to, to honor what Dave was asking from us. And he said early on this, I remember really clearly, there was a big meeting, and he said, I want to see, I don't know how we do this, but I want to see the hand of the artist in every frame. See you guys later. I'm like, okay, Dave. Okay. So we got together, and our supervisors are so talented. So our art director, Andre Kirk, incredible. Our director of assets, Paul Zenis, beautiful. Our director of animation, Keith Kellogg, amazing. Our director of cinematography and lighting, Joel Aaron, the Mad Wizard, I like to call him. We started talking, and, again, for my part in it, I didn't tell everybody what to do, but this is what we got to do. Everybody hands in, break, go, let's figure it out. And one thing that Joel started playing with was painting on glass. So he comes from ILM, and we talk about kit bashing, Scotch tape and popsicle sticks and tchotchkes, whatever we can do to make this work is what we do. So again, before we shot anything, he and his artists, his team is amazing. We have an in-house art team. We have a team at CGCG in Taiwan, and we're all collaborating all the time. Our in-house team took oil paint and gouache and painted strokes on glass. And then Joel would optically film those and add them to the rendering tools so that things like smoke, if you look really closely, are made up of little aberrated brush strokes. And then you zoom out, and it looks like some stylized smoke, but it's made out of an artist. The artist's hand is in the frame, just like Dave asked for. And Maul's face and Devin's face and all the cloth. The cloth is a whole thing we could talk all day about. Has that same methodology. Our matte paintings in the background are, in some cases, literally oil painted backgrounds that have been filmed and added to our render. There are physical models in a couple of shots. We just went crazy. We had fun. Everybody, and it was hard, but everybody's imagination was opened up. And again, Athena supported us to push and to do everything we could to make this work. And at the end of the day, when Dave started to see our tests, he was really thrilled. He was really excited. Like, you guys are doing it. And here's some more notes. Keep pushing. Keep pushing.
Keep going. Go further. Yeah.
Go further. And it created this not only painterly feel, but this sort of gritty, edgy vibe that fit Maul, that fit Shadow Lord, that fit everything. And it affected how we wrote the show. It affected how we shot it. And it certainly affected the music and the sound design.
Yeah. So, sorry, I was just thinking about this. So, I mean, absolutely the sound design. I mean, I was reacting to the visuals I was seeing early on and just thinking, how do I make this story shine? How do I make it feel like Star Wars? But how do I also honor this painterly style? And, the first question that I had, because we're on this new planet, Janix, and it needs to feel like its own thing, but it also needs to have one foot in Star Wars. It's kind of film noirish. It's kind of Blade Runner-ish, what is this sort of world, this sort of painterly Sid Mead world, sound like? And that was the first challenge. Then I had to figure out how to break it when the Empire shows up, and that was actually the really fun part. The more time I spent on the first half designing what a police force would sound like, what does a space phone sound like in a police bullpen, those kind of things that I had to make, the sirens, the police chatter, the droids, And then I wanted to ground the show in certain ways, like with Maul's classic lightsaber sound. But even that, it's more fiery, it's more jagged, and so I took all of Ben's classic lightsaber sounds from the Phantom Menace, specifically for Maul, and I ran them through software. I think it was NV2. That was one of my steps. I grabbed and made a bunch of different sizzly type of very jagged sounds. And I enveloped them with the classic swings and windmilling of Maul to give it more of a refresh in the high end and in the high mids and highs, to have it really feel this sort of scintillating, sizzling, dangerous, crackling sound. And that helped me in the mix tremendously too, especially by the end of the episode when I had 6 people fighting, 3 of which have double blades. We'll get there, but I had to kind of figure out how to make them each sound slightly different, but still sound like lightsabers. And I would say the other way to answer your question, Glenn, about how to honor the art style of the show is that the mix is incredibly aggressive. It's very forward in terms of feeling like you're in the fight. There are times when we pull everything back and we get surreal, obviously, and the music carries everything. But there are times where I really want to feel those impacts. The saber impacts don't have just that classic Ben Burtt spark to them. They also have this like beefy, low mid punch almost every time they lock with each other. So it feels like taiko drums are playing when they're fighting. It feels like a ballet almost that's full frequency, all the highs, all the lows. And I think it was important to have that sort of aggressive mix and be in it and feel a little more realistic in order to almost counterbalance the stylized images. Anytime I could find reality, I would. One of my favorite moments, and I have to give a shout out to my colleague Derek Espino, who I worked with on The Last of Us at Sony. I was a manager at the time, almost just watching these sound designers from a distance. But an explosion went off and it rattled everything in the house. And I thought that was such a great step into reality. And so there's this wonderful moment where, Riley's home alone in the apartment. He doesn't know where his dad is. And these gunships, after the Empire's invaded, are buzzing these apartment buildings, these civilian apartment buildings. And so even though it's not on screen, I shook the kitchen, because I wanted to play the fear of like this teenager, this high school kid is alone and he doesn't know what happened to his dad. His parents are divorced. But the weight of the story was something that I really focused on, almost to kind of lend more and more and more credibility to highly stylized visuals. And I think the marriage of that really, really worked. And the more I pushed that, the better it felt.
It's so effective. And this is also, I think I have this right, this is the first Star Wars animated show that you guys have done in Dolby Atmos, right? So that also opened up just more real estate possibilities for you.
Yeah, I got to pan Sam's voice all over the place and do all of my verbs and my delays, all my spaces, all my backgrounds, even the music. They're all kind of in a full, 7.1.2. And, I could pan the train over your head and on the ceiling as they jump over the tracks. I can, move Sam's voice as he's, psychologically trying to break Devin down in the third episode. All of that stuff was really useful to have Dolby Atmos available to me. And so I had way too much fun on the mix stage with that stuff, freaking everybody out. And the same was true with jump scares. I used it for the jump scares on the stage.
There's that crazy moment in episode 10 when Vader's arm comes through I shouted when that happened. I was so shocked by it.
That I have to credit Gary Rydstrom for that style. I mean, and every horror movie that I've ever studied. So when I was an intern, I got to sit and watch Gary mix The Haunting.
The Haunting, Jan de Bont's movie, which was one of the first things that Gary was working on.
Yes,
when I
that's right.
Skywalker.
Yeah, it was the same summer,
right.
summer '99, and I watched him mix a jump scare. And I never got to do one in my career until Maul. And I remember getting to the point where I could tell if Gary mixed something, even if I hadn't read the credits yet, because he did this wonderful trick, and it's in Star Wars as well. I mean, the most famous example is the asteroid, the sonic depth charges that he and Ben put together on the stage, where everything goes silent before you have this massive release of energy and sound. But just bringing everything down to almost absolute zero, a microsecond before a big sound happened. And then I, blast, the Vader's fist coming through the wall is not just in front of you. It's in all of Dolby Atmos. The same is true when Sam goes, Devin, like that, and she wakes up. I really use the space, and I use a drop down to almost nothing, which I attribute to Gary and the great mixers at Skywalker that I basically studied for years and then finally got to do it. I was so happy.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I remember that mix very well. And one of the things I used to love to do at Skywalker was, in the middle of the afternoon when things would get a little quiet, I'd make rounds on the mixing stages and I would just go sit and listen to these guys working. And Gary was doing an effects pre-dub on The Haunting, and he was working on the scene. It was kind of just like, it was nothing major going on, but there was these two characters sitting in front of a fireplace.
Breaks. That's it.
Yes.
That was the scare. I was like, why was that so scary? Sorry, go ahead.
No, he did exactly what you like. He suddenly took everything out, and then there's that pop in the fireplace, and he cranked that pop so loud that it went off, and it was just like a bomb going off in the room. And it was. I think we got the same lesson.
It was the exact same scene. It was with Owen Wilson in front of a fireplace, and I just was like, this guy's a genius. This is enough like a maybe a quiet moment, but it was very terrifying because of what he did with sound. And I remember also that sort of poltergeist effect that I loved from the movie Poltergeist, that sort of reverse reverb sound that you would hear with Carrie Ann through the walls, he was doing in The Haunting. And so I used that a lot in this show as well, that sort of classic 80s, what I think of as a classic 80s ghost sound, which is that reverse delay, reverse reverb, or like on a classic album from the 70s and 80s, that reverse, drum hit thing.
Where it kind of feels like it's getting sucked back into the track.
And so I did that to Sam's voice quite a bit. To sort of bring the dark side on screen with sound.
Well, since you brought this up, David, one of the questions I have, Sam's voice is well, I should say Maul's voice is so mesmerizing in the show. Is that 100% Sam out of the box, or what are you doing? Are you doing any processing on his voice? How do you get us there?
Well, let's start with Sam. So Sam's performance, Sam actually brings in his own mic for the performance.
Do you have your Maul? Do you have your Maul mic?
Sam, do you want to talk about that?
Vanguard V13. That's it sounds very similar to a U87, but it gives you less of what you don't want and more of what you do. It's warmer. It's a tube mic. Also, there's some breathiness to Maul's voice. So I don't want a bunch of high mid junk that David's going to have to get rid of. I don't want that. Who wants that? So the V13 again gives you some of the character of a U87, but it gives you less of the less of that and more of the warmth, and for that reason, it's the perfect mic for Maul.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of the cast was all on U87s, and I was on a U87 at home, even when I recorded at home. Sam being on the Vanguard, what it did, because when he records Maul, he's right on the mic like this.
Proximity
what
effect.
that does, though, is that, that sort of high mid little bump that's in a U87 can really affect consonants. It can really affect that breathiness. And so this kind of warmed it out, and it puts you right in, Maul's head, basically. I did bring out a little bit. I basically was like, I see what Sam's going for, and I just wanted to yes and his sound with a little subharmonic synth. So there is a little bit of a, I think I can't remember which one I used. It might have been Waves Low Air or something, but it was one of those, classic, sort of prequel plugins, on his voice to just help, bring out, that low end even more and exaggerate it, especially once it's fighting music, and backgrounds in Star Wars also tend to be really like big and boomy. Like if you're on a ship, there's one line that Sam says at the end of the finale where I feel like you can hear it the most clearly when Dryden Voss says, I've upheld my end of the bargain, and he goes, and I will honor mine. And that sound is exactly what I was going for with what Sam was bringing. I feel like my job is, again, just to yes and everything that the team and Brad and the actors give me, and just go, oh, I see. Let me shake hands with this and agree with it, and just give you a little bit more like that. And that's kind of Sam. But it all comes from his dramatic interpretation of what's on the page. Oftentimes what's not on the page, but what Sam and the cast find. And I was going to go back to something that you said earlier, Brad. Sam's theatrical background, or on being on set. When they shoot the reverse, he'd be on the other end of the camera, generously giving to actors as they're doing their coverage. And Sam was doing the same thing. And that absolutely affects the reads of all of us, when we're together.
So Sam, you show up for the other actors' voice recording sessions, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I feel if I can't make it, I feel very, very bad. So I try to stick around for everyone. We used to do entirely ensemble records back in Clone Wars and Rebels, and that is made a little bit more difficult these days, especially since our cast is very multinational. But if someone is in town, if they're coming in, I feel the need to be there and give them an approximation of what Two Boots sounds like, or what so-and-so sounds like, or, like maybe I was in the session with another actor, so I remember what they did. So I try to give that to the actor. But really what it is it's just, especially with these live action actors, I know what they're up against because I was up against it when I was making the transition to voiceover. So for them, I'm trying to put them in a familiar environment. They don't want to really be in a fish tank, with people shouting directions at them. What they want to be doing is locking in with another actor and throwing the ball back and forth. So that's what I'm trying to give them when we do that.
And it's so helpful. I just got to say, Sam, you're amazing. It makes my job so easy. And it's so delightful when you are playing Two Boots or Lawson or even Devin. Sam has a version of these characters that every time on the other side of the booth, me and Maddie Mick, we look at each other and we go, why is Sam so good? This is stupid. It's so good. And literally, Sam, you give a cadence, not only just for what Lawson might sound like, but the select that we cut into the cut that you remember. I don't know how you remember that so well. It's so cool.
It should be noted that when we can have people together, all working together, we always do when we can. It's just that sometimes we can't always do that. So I don't want to, it's not that every time you hear someone acting that it's with, you're actually secretly hearing me with them. No. Like oftentimes whenever they can figure out all the schedule stuff, people do work with each other, and that's the better alternative. You know what I mean? Because my Two Boots isn't as good as Richard's. So,
Sam was the solve when we couldn't do a cast record because people were, Gideon was off shooting a movie or Richard Ayoade's in London, or Wagner's, his whole career is exploding, like it was during award season.
He's had a pretty good year.
He's had a good year, Wagner.
He's also good as
He's
Wagner.
great as Wagner. He does really well.
We have some pretty amazing clips that Lucasfilm sent over. And look, we could spend an hour just talking about episode 10. That is wall-to-wall action. There's so much going on. But I also want to spend a little time talking about, I love episode 8. There's some really amazing things happening in that episode, especially from a sound design perspective. I feel like, we touched on this a little earlier, but we get to see such a different side of Maul in this show, and specifically in this episode, we see him wounded and rattled and really having internal struggles.
Don't go. I must, my brother.
Stop there! What have you done to my brother? Answer me, you monster!
Your focus is feeble, my young apprentice. Now, strike at me. Pathetic.
You must have been
Sam, I just want to ask you, this is getting to the heart of what we were talking about the emotionality of it and the backstory and the richness of this character. So tell me about approaching that sequence and how you kind of got yourself in the space to do those vocalizations.
That was me and Brad making stuff up with the direction of Dave Filoni and other, because that sequence went through some iterations. We had a version 1 that didn't quite work, but the ideas were good. Then there was a version 2, which had pieces of version 1 in there. And that version, as far as I was concerned, I'm like, this is working. And then Dave came in and said, wait a second, what if we do this? And then version 3 was the beyond all expectations, like, oh my God, this is wonderful version. But it had lineage and pieces of the previous version that were still in there. So we were on our way toward a destination. And what was fun about it is Brad, as I recall, we didn't totally know what the destination was. We were experimenting. Brad would throw out an idea. Hey, say something like this. And then I would try that. And Brad, do you want to speak to some of that experience?
Yeah. it was both ways, man. It was like, there's times where you were just riffing stuff and Maddie Mick is writing it down. Oh my gosh, what's going on here? And it was just this beautiful collaboration, more than normal. Usually by the time we get to the booth, I know we've talked a little bit today about having animatics and really clear idea where we're going, and sometimes that stuff will change, but usually we know where we're driving. In this case, Dave put it to us again, like, go swing harder, you're close, swing harder, and that had an effect on the writing and on the blocking, certainly on the performance. So it was a very back and forth collaboration. Yeah, I just felt bad because we ran you through the ringer. We're like 3 or 4 times where literally the emotions were poured out in the studio. And I'm not going to lie, I was crying. You brought tears out of me, and you were emotional. And I remember afterwards, are you okay, Sam? You were exhausted. You put everything into the performance on multiple occasions.
What was great though was, yes, I was exhausted the three various times that we did it, but the fact that it was getting us closer to the goal, the destination of doing something really unique with the character. I've said it to you before, and I will say it here for the record. Anytime you want to exhaust me, if that's where it goes, the exploration is so worth it. So worth it. It was just so happy with how that ended up. And also Brad did me another wonderful favor. He said, hey, as this is all in Maul's head, I want you to play all the characters. And I was like, well, I'm not D. Bradley Baker. And he's like, today you are. You get in there. and so he charged me with coming up with a young version of Clancy Brown's character, Savage Opress, the Emperor, and then also resurrecting Spider Maul being the first appearance in Clone Wars. When Maul first shows up, he's not what we expect. We are expecting Darth Maul from Phantom Menace, and what we get is a maddened creature. Essentially, he's been killed and tossed aside, and what he grew into was this monstrous half man, half spider silhouette, where literally he has spider legs made of garbage, animated by the dark side of the Force. Ask George Lucas; it was his idea. And so when we brought Maul back, the first appearance, he was quite mad. He was tormented, tortured. His voice was all over the place.
Most of that improvised by Sam, right? I mean, you improvised a lot of that stuff.
That's right. We didn't have dialogue for it. So I came in with sheets of handwritten, scrawled notes, and so that's what we did, and that's what's in the episode. And so just like that, when we were doing this, we had sort of a similar process where people like, Brad and Matt were throwing out ideas. I was writing down ideas. I came in with a bunch of ideas. But what's interesting about that sequence is, for me, is Spider Maul, for example, the maddened, crazy version. He's got, one or two lines, very quick. I think he says, oh, please don't leave me, master, left to die. Help me. And each of these characters have to be in their own world. So that chunk is a result of doing a whole session or a whole 20 minutes as Spider Maul to find the right piece. So it may be a quick little thing in the show, but there was a lot of thought that we all put into what that piece was going to be, and it involved me going berserk and weeping and screaming and stuff like that. I'm so pleased with the result.
It's a good day at work when you can get there and do that. And then David, for you, that just opened up so many great possibilities for your sound design.
Yeah, and it was too. I mean, when I say it was too much, what I mean is that we had sort of we had been blessed with a kitchen sink of ideas, and it was a matter of finding the moment to moment of that sequence, and I will say, just again to zoom out, this show, it has been more than any other show that I've worked on, and they've all been great, but this one in particular had that sort of, the way Matt Wood describes, sort of the old school feeling of Jack Films, this little pod of Lucasfilm and Skywalker Sound and ILM that are making this thing, as a surprisingly small group of just like passing ideas back and forth. This sequence, I think, really exemplifies that the most, because it was given to me by Brad, and he said, take a swing at it. And I said the same thing to the Kiners. By the way, I can't say enough great things about Kevin, Sean, and Dina Kiner, our composers on the show. And we've worked with them obviously for years. And so we have a shorthand where I know, they're going to hit this. And I start bringing up faders, and sure enough, they're hitting it. Even the first time I'm listening to it, it's like, I know how Brad's going to spot it. I know how they're going to hit it. And they know what I want to hit, and they get out of I don't have to move anything. They've already gotten out of my way, and they know I'm going to go kaboom, and then they're going to give me the melody afterwards. Like, there's a lot of that. But with this sequence in particular, there was a lot of, give me a lot of ideas, Kiners, give me a lot of ideas, actors, give me a lot of ideas in editorial. So when I got it, it was just a wall of like different vocals. and a wall of music. And then I was like, I was working on that chase that happens right after it. I think there was this great speeder bike chase. And so I had my sound effects editors help me out. Kevin Bolin, Bill Rudolph, Michael Brinkman, give me this big sandstorm. So by the time I brought everything up, I was like, I need to spend time carving what this needs to be moment to moment and trimming. But more than that, also just like finding the drama in his head. Sam and I have been talking. We talk pretty much every day. We've been talking for years, and we talk a lot about Star Wars. Brad and I talk, and this is kind of his real dark side Hamlet moment. He's not only very, very dangerous, but he has been wronged so many times, and that makes him absolutely dangerous, and it makes him slip into madness, and now he's slipping into madness again. What does that sound like? He's not there yet, but what does that descent sound like? How do I use Dolby Atmos to do it? How do I use these voices? And we actually did it a couple of times. The first day on the mix stage, it was halfway there. And Brad, I remember you said a 2-word phrase. You said, keep at it. Let's look at it again in 2 weeks. And you said, go nuts. And I said, okay. Well, but that actually ended up having to be subtractive. So I do a couple of things in there. I mean, there are times where I pull everything out, and I mean everything, just so you can hear a very specific sound that I think triggers a head turn or a line from Maul. One of my favorite things was a few years ago, I had been tasked with remastering the first 6 films for Airplanes, episodes 1 through 6 from my Matt. So I knew where all the Phantom Menace stems were. So I thought, what would be really cool is before Kenobi shows up out of the mist, I want to hear those laser gates opening and closing. And it's not just the sound, it's the rhythm of how they were cut in that movie specifically that people have seen a million times. So that, and then I got really bold and I'm like, oh, they're going to fire me. And I said, well, what if we actually used a stem of Ewan McGregor here saying no and a vocal from Ewan McGregor? And I had to take that to Athena and be like, hey, someone needs to call his people. And, and that's why he's...
Are we going to have to pay Ewan for doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. So that's why he's credited in the episode, is because I thought, well, if you're going to put him on screen, there, sound carries emotional memory, and you need to hear that no, and you need to hear the exact same slice sound that's in the movie when that happens. I have a graphic EQ at my desk on a custom fader map on the S6. And so I do this really weird thing, and I've actually never mentioned this part before, but I do this really weird thing where he's a child being tortured by the Emperor. Like the sequence goes there. So I do this, it's dark. And so I do this thing where I'm both doing a filter sweep while I'm boosting the mids at the same time. I'm doing a low pass sweep. So it goes like that. And the only thing you hear besides muted lightning is a little heartbeat. And Sam screaming echoed out, And then from there, I pull everything down. And then with the music, it was so much material that I found this kick drum stem in the Kiner's music. And I was like, well, what if I pull everything out and I just add a heartbeat to that? And those discoveries only happened with the blessing of the producer, the director, the actors all bringing their A game. Even Sam was like, what would be cool is when I say that Sauvage Opress line, if you took Clancy Brown's performance and cut it in halfway through, that was Sam's idea. And I was like, that's brilliant. So everyone's coming in and like in this old fashioned way, old school way of like, thinking again, hive mind about how to make this be what it is. And I remember we sat poor Tracy Canobio from Lucasfilm PR. And we're like, hey, can you just come in as a test audience? This is on the mix stage. And I'm like, Tracy, come in and watch this. She goes, okay. And she sits down and we just played it for her. And she just she was just like absolutely terrified, ghost faced like this when it was over. And I'm like, okay, I think maybe we've pushed it just enough. She was our first test audience. It was great.
That was an amazing moment because we trust Tracy so much. She's been around forever, and I can tell you times in Clone Wars and Rebels where maybe I was trying something or we did something or stuff like that, and you just glance over at Tracy, and if she's like this, like, oh no, wait a second, let me try it again. If Tracy's like that, it's like, okay, let me try it again. If Tracy's like this, you're like, okay, we're good. There are stories of of her being a sounding board for Dave at key moments and just being like, Tracy, what are you feeling here? When you'd show her something and she'd express it. And then there would be a note that would come from that, from Tracy, that would transform something. She certainly helped us like that.
And that's a great thing about Skywalker Ranch too, is that there's always this, I know you weren't planning on doing this, but you're in the building, get in here and tell us what you think. Kind of like The Haunting, doing the rounds, watching Gary mix The Haunting all those years ago. You never know how that's going to affect how things turn out.
It should also be noted, before we move on from the 108 thing, it should be noted, we keep mentioning Athena Portillo. None of this crazy, mad wizard laboratory stuff that Brad or anyone or David, that anyone's doing, all these experimentations that we do and stuff like that, that is all supported by our general Athena. We wouldn't be able to do these things if Athena wasn't way ahead of us saying, you're going to want to mess with stuff. Okay, no, well, do we have the resources?
This is television, right? This is television. There is a schedule. We are trying to make it as cinematic as possible within our given time frame and our resources.
And without Tracy, without Athena, Tracy as well. Without Athena, having her precognition of what it is that we will need and when, and also Athena's been around for so long that her creative instincts are really dead on. So we have a wonderful general looking out for us and making sure that we can do the things that we want to do. It's really incredible.
So good. The best producer I've ever worked with. It's like we're building this crazy bonfire. We're running out of wood. And Athena's, no. I have plenty of wood for you guys. It's amazing. The support and the collaboration. We can't talk enough about Athena. She's the best.
The ability to experiment in the mix and to do what David is talking about, it just takes time. And of course, in our business, time means money. And so that's just, it's great that you have the support of a producer who understands the role of sound in storytelling and will fight for those resources for you guys to be able to do that.
Well said. Yeah.
Definitely.
It's such a shock when Darth Vader shows up at the end of episode 9. And then, I want to talk about episode 10, and Vader obviously is a huge driver of the action in that episode.
Come on! This is useless. We need to move. Run.
He's such an interesting presence because, neither Maul nor Daki have any idea what they're dealing with. I love that dialogue. Like, what is this? Like, because, and of course they haven't seen Vader before, but and then it was such a bold choice not to have Vader speak and just to have him be this relentless, evil, unstoppable presence that's just pounding his way through this episode. So, I could talk about this for an hour, but David, this iconic character, what was your approach to Vader, handling Vader in that episode 10?
Well, let me just start by saying I've never seen Vader so true to the David Prowse look and feel of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi and A New Hope. The team, and Brad, I don't know if you can speak to this, but the team absolutely nailed the physicality of Vader, the choreography of Vader, the effortless nature of his fighting, and the camera angles where he is just so like dominating in the frame. All of that was handed to me that I reacted to. So first of all, that was nailed, in a way that I've never seen, and we've had Vader in video games. We've had him in animation. We've had him in shows before. That was something special.
we all realized really early on that he's got nothing to say to anybody. So that's we'll talk more about what, his lack of dialogue. But for the design, we did, just like you're saying, David, we went back, me and Andre Kirk, our director, we went back to early photos of David Prowse, and we wanted to get that big, massive build. And the final frame version of Vader, fully animated and lit, was a huge, this is the same for anything, but in this case, more than normal, it was a huge collaboration between the designers, story artists, and the animators and lighters. His cape creates his silhouette, especially in Empire Strikes Back. It's, we dissected every move, everything he does. And there's this beautiful, huge, heavy presence to Vader. And when he moves fast. And it seems like he's always around the corner. He never has to run anywhere. So how do we capture that when we need him to go this great distance was a really huge, really big challenge. But his cape, the silhouette he makes, helmet down to his cape, was so critical. There were some pretty advanced shots. The cloth is the last thing we do. There are some advanced shots where we see him moving really, really well, where he's heavy, and when he moves quick, he's really, really fast. But without the cape, people are, wait a minute, this doesn't quite look right. Just hold the lines, everybody. I promise you, it's going to be perfect. Just wait till the cloth gets in. Sure enough, once we got the cloth simulation in, Keith and his team doing such a beautiful job. He was this imposing menace. We tried to make him like a horror villain, and that was, dissecting Empire Strikes Back. That's how it felt. Luke turns around the corner, and there's Vader ready to smack him, and we wanted to get that feeling all the way through this episode. So yeah, we worked really hard to get that feeling. So it's great. Thanks, David, for saying that. That was amazing.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Glenn, about how do you treat Vader, how do you approach Vader, it's his breathing. It's his breathing, and that sounds obvious, but let me explain. He could say anything. We've had many actors play Vader. We've solved Vader in a lot of, accomplished Vader in a lot of different ways with a lot of very talented people. It was so powerful just having him breathe, because there was a casual nature, almost an annoyance that Vader seemed to feel through that breathing. And I had a conversation with Dave Filoni about this months prior, where, we talked about breathing, and he asked me about my take on breathing, and conversations that I've had with Matt Wood. He asked me how I handled the breathing on Force Unleashed. He was very interested in breathing, and sure enough, it's one of the first things that I did was decide, and this is important to know, that this is something that Ben Burtt found very clearly in the classic trilogy, when to use Vader breathing slow and menacing, when to use his normal paced breath, and when to use his quick paced breath, because Ben made different recordings for all three of those out of the same source, but all three of those, and he used all three in the classic trilogy. Of course, he also had Vader, wounded. We don't go there, but when I cut in his breathing, and there is a timing to it, and it's not literal. You have to break the rules based on the rhythm of the cut. He needs to be inhaling when you see him and exhaling at the right time in order, and even in between, saber blocks and things like that, so you can hear it. When he is fighting three people and he's breathing that slow, it's even more terrifying because he's not breaking a sweat. And
he's doing it with one hand.
With one hand. And again, it's back to that yes and thing that I was talking about, that sort of shaking hands with the concepts of the picture that's delivered to me. They animated him that way. So of course he's going to breathe slow. He's not breaking a sweat. He only starts breathing quickly for a couple of reasons. He's either moving faster, or he's trying to terrify, or he's irritated. Like there's some sort of emotional change. So he doesn't speak, but he absolutely does through his breath. And I'll give you a great example. And this is, I think, one of the most beautiful parts of that episode is the final scene with Docky, where he is about to kill Docky. And, in The Empire Strikes Back, when he jump scares Luke, that's the first time you really hear in the classic trilogy that fast breathing loop that Ben Burtt recorded. And it's because Vader's like, all right, I'm done messing around. I am going to scare you and I'm going to murder you right now, is what that breathing feels like. And so he's doing that to Docky, particularly after Docky, who, by the way, is the only person to get a single hit on Vader. It's not Maul. It's Docky. Docky gets the hit. So
Thanks,
was
guys.
Docky wrong? Yeah. Thanks, guys. Sorry, Sam. But it annoys Vader. And what Nick Anastasio did in the cut is he's pounding on Docky, and Docky's down like this. And every time he pounds on him, Nick increases the cut by a couple frames. Every time, a couple frames. What that does is it makes the effect look like he's hitting harder. So I make a sound that makes it sound like he's hitting harder. And I do the inhale every time it cuts back to Vader, and the exhale, and blah, blah, blah. And then the last time, Nick held the frame even longer, so I changed the speed of the breath to, so it's pull, and then it's whack, and then you reverb it out, and then the Kiners knew exactly how to hit it, so they do this wonderful melody, and that's when you know that Docky's been defeated. And it's all of those things working together. Obviously, Vader has his own lightsaber sound, that has its sort of unique timbre to it. It's unique sort of almost like distorted tape saturation type of energy to it that's a little different than Luke's, or in this case, Docky's, so all of those effects working together create Vader. And he does, in his own way, talk through that entire episode every time he's on screen. He's the center of the frame. He's the center of the action. And I did the same thing in the mix. I've got 6 lightsabers going, but you're always going to hear his. And everyone else comes in and out away from it.
I'd like to point something out that you guys have accomplished with Vader that helped me as an actor portray Maul, because I hope the audience gets the sense that Maul does come from a sort of culture, the Sith way of thinking. And the impression that I started having in terms of when Brad was sharing more material with me, and I saw how he depicted the Inquisitors through sound, through the way that they were animated, how they were very soulless. There was something just missing inside them. And you follow that train of thought, and finally you get to Vader, and he's the darkest of the dark, that these are extensions, the Inquisitors are extensions of Vader, and there's just a black hole where their heart should be. And what it allowed me to do in pickups is to play Maul as a guy who goes, wait, whoa, I'm of the dark side. This isn't what it's supposed to be. There's something wrong here. I object to this. This is darker than I ever dreamed that this could be. And so again, when I would see these cuts, or I'd see these where things were going, or David would tell me what he'd planned to do sound wise, Brad would tell me this is what's happening here with these characters and how they're behaving, and he'd show me things. It completely changed the way that Maul needed to be played, because Maul needed to be distinct psychologically and philosophically from what he's seeing from the true dark side, right? Because Maul thinks, yeah, I know all about the dark side. And then he meets the Inquisitors and Vader, and he goes, oh, I didn't know it was going this wrong in Palpatine's empire. I didn't realize that, and hopefully the audience gets that sense that Maul comes, that, when he was coming up with Palpatine, that the empire was supposed to be something different. But now you see the empire with Vader and the Inquisitors, and he's like, oh, no, count me out. No way. This is wrong. This is really wrong.
That's actually great. I hadn't thought about that as a big emotional turning point for Maul, but it really is. And Brad, I love, you put your finger on something I'd never thought about before, but it's the essence of why Vader is so terrifying. He's always there, but he never runs.
Yeah. And to that, we cut several shots out of that episode before we locked it, because we had a little bit more of his locomotion, which was walking. And Dave said, Brad, just cut out all of those shots. You're going to love it. I'm like, okay, Dave. And he was right. It was amazing. So he's literally always there every step of the way.
I remember that non-running rule from Force Unleashed. In the opening level, you play as Vader, and it was one of the first things that was told to us. I don't know if it came from George or who it came from, but it was like, Vader doesn't run. He only walks. So like Sam's character runs through the entire game, but in the opening level, that whole level was designed by the pace of Vader walking instead of running through the level.
Well, you guys have touched on this a little bit, but David, I want to give you a chance just to talk about, that episode 10 is just wall-to-wall action. You've got so many, it's just fight after fight. You've got so much action going on, so many lightsabers. Talk to me about the process, because obviously if everything is a moment, then nothing ends up being a moment. And your big job as you go through this is shaping and making decisions and just, making sure that you don't wear the audience down. So talk about that process and sort of how you find your way through that and shape it so that it actually, builds to something?
That's a great question. And I will say that it starts with a great sound edit. And particularly towards the end of the season, it started off small where it was just me and the Foley crew working at the beginning of the season. By the end of the season, we had another Foley. Kimberly Patrick came on to help Frank Ranella edit Foley. I had 3 sound effects editors working with me that I mentioned before, Kevin, Bill, and Michael. And I said, Bill, I need you to, here's how I cut the lightsabers in the 4th episode. Here's how I cut this Inquisitor in the 6th episode. Here's how I cut Maul in the 3rd episode. Take all these clip groups and please just cut all these lightsabers. And he did a great job. I think it took him about 5 days, 4 or 5 days, total, because he was also doing the impacts and the force sounds and all that kind of stuff. And then, I take it and I listen to it and I go, oh, this is great. And then, sweeten it and I start positioning and panning. And, I'm panning at half speed and I still can't get the joystick over fast enough. I'm having to mouse mix a lot of this stuff just to get it, because I had to use everything available to me. I had to use EQ. I had to use depth. I had to use panning and I had to use volume. I had to use everything I could. And I would bring everything in and out towards Vader. And when I did that, it really helped, because when I first got it, it's just a wall of just low mids. In fact, this is a funny story. Ben Burtt, he's working on all kinds of stuff, and he just sees me every once in a while in the tech building and he goes, "Hey David, how's it going? How's our favorite Sith Lord?" And I go, I go, he's great. He's great.
Do you bring him in and play some stuff for him from time to time?
I'd be so scared. I wouldn't care. I'm terrified. But he does.
He's there. So he's there every Friday morning for breakfast. You could.
He's and now he's working on a new show and so he sits down, and Brad, you were there. He sits down with a cup of soup in the fitness center at lunch. And he goes, "So how's it going?" And I said, "It's good. I'm working on this thing right now. I'm mixing it where there's like 6 people with lightsabers and 3 of them are double. There's like 9 blades on screen." And he goes, and the first thing he said was, "That's a lot of stacking in the low mids." That's the first thing. Like, he just knew, and that's exactly right. So here's what I'll say. Because I was brought in early as Spybot, because I had animatics and scripts, I was able to say, all right, I'm going to use a David Acord style lightsaber for Devin in the style of Ahsoka. I'm going to use a classic Jedi tradition lightsaber for Daki. Maul is Maul. For this Inquisitor, I'm going to use Rebels. For this Inquisitor, I'm going to lean more into like a proto Kylo Ren sizzle. And those things should all sound together because I knew what was coming by the 9th and 10th episodes. I knew it was coming because Brad had let me in, and that was invaluable because now I have 6 different, pretty different sounds that I can work with. And I do have to like scoop things out in certain shots. Otherwise it blends together, so there's a lot of that going on, but really it's about clarity moment to moment. And Glenn, you might know this quote. I think it was Walter Murch. It's like your ear can only hear 2.5 things at once.
Yes.
So that is absolutely true. You mentioned having a musical background. It is a concerto for sound effects, dialogue, and Foley and music. And I have to decide which section of the orchestra has the melody. And that's really the challenge, is moment to moment to moment. You can't mix it like a pop song where you find your levels and you bring stuff in and out slowly. It's like, no, you're carving moment to moment. And that starts with a great sound effects edit. So I had a great team. It was a huge team effort. It was a great music composition job that knew exactly what to hit and when. And I was able to just kind of bob and weave my way through it. And there's no way out of it other than to just shape and carve until it starts to pop off the screen, because you're like, there it is. Now I can hear everything. And that just took time, and I was given the time to do it. And then Brad comes in and we get greedy. That was the best part. He comes in and he goes, well, what if we tried this? And then we got to polish. That was like the best part, is that he would come in and have these great notes and make a good thing great.
Dave, this is the last one for you. When creating sounds for a fictional universe, is there a place you like to visit for inspiration?
Sounds can come to you at the most random times. And it really is that random encounter with something that sounds funny that ends up being the gold, I don't want to give anything away, but when I was doing recording for the next season, there's stuff that I recorded, and whether I use it or not, I'm still not sure. But I'm building a library constantly by finding stuff that sounds really interesting around the house. I told this story once where I was at my daughter's game and I thought the smack of an aluminum bat would be a great element inside a laser blast, because it has that wonderful tink and echo, that you could put like a real, low end thud in the front of that. And it would be this weird thing you could process. I've done that. My neighbor's broken wood chipper once, power washer motor, the sound of Spybot, someone was, I think you were at a dinner party and someone was doing that thing with a wine glass where you rub the edge and it starts to resonate. So I recorded that, and then I took that and I pitched it and layered it and I added some radio garble, and that's the sound of Spybot steady. And then I Dopplered that, and that's because we were having a great Friday night, so that kind of stuff, where do I like to go? I don't know. I just try and keep my ears open and try and learn from Ben Burtt or anyone at Skywalker that has told similar stories, because it's usually the happy accidents that cause something unexpected, which Star Wars is all about.
Well said.
Could I ask you a question really quick on that? What kind of field recorder do you use when you go out and do that?
Oh, well, there's the version that I want to use, which is like the Sound Devices version with the shotgun mic and the Zeppelin and the windscreen and there's all that. But then there's the, oh my God, let me grab my version, which is what I mostly use, honestly. If I'm recording something for around the house, I either have a stereo Crown SAS mic that I use, which is really cool. It's kind of a PZM based mic, or I've got a Sennheiser 416 shotgun mic that I'll use for mono. Some people do an MS record like that, but a lot of times I grab one of those Zoom recorders, because you can fit it in your backpack in your pocket and you just set it down somewhere and you walk away. Ben has this great story where he was like in a 7-Eleven or something, and he heard he opened one of the refrigerator doors to get like a Gatorade or something, and he heard a malfunctioning motor in there, and he just kind of didn't say anything. So he walked back to his car, got his little recorder, and he just opened the fridge and he just put it in there, shut the door, and then just kept looking around, shopping. And then once he found everything, he went back in, grabbed his recorder, turned it off, and then went and paid for everything. That kind of stuff is just, I love those stories.
When I first met Ben Burtt and he first invited me into his office, I couldn't believe what I was looking at, because I was, there was all these cool things everywhere. And then on the side of the wall, there's an old Moog there, and it says "do not touch" on all the knobs and levers. And you go, well, that's R2-D2. Is that R2-D2? He's like, that's R2-D2. You're like, okay, cool. So then I'm looking on his desk and there's this pristine piece of equipment, and I'm just staring at it. It's a reel-to-reel field tape recorder with a strap on it, but it looked perfect. It was in perfect condition. And it was in such perfect condition. I'm like, so they made this is a new field recorder. Cool. That's interesting. He's still using reel to reel. That's great. And then I looked at the serial number and there was a date of like 1972 on it. And I'm like, Ben, what Ben? And I literally stopped. I'm like, Ben, this is,
it was his original Nagra.
It's his original Nagra in his office. Amazing. And he's got all of his original oscillators and yeah.
And I was like, I was stuttering. I'm like, it's too beautiful. Is this what I think it is? And he's like, yeah, that's my field recorder. That's how I created the blaster sounds and all that stuff. And, but I'm like, Ben, it looks too new. He's like, well, I like to keep my equipment in good shape. And I was just like, wow, and Glenn, just so you understand that when I met you and you gave me the tour of Skywalker Sound, just to give you a sense for who I am, these are isothermal tube traps. I have about 18 of them around me right now. So understand, I am, you can't talk about sound and sound design and mixing and all this stuff without me just going, oh yeah, keep talking.
Sam will talk, Matt will call Sam and Sam will answer. Skywalker South, how can I
Skywalker South, right.
That's right. So good.
How can I help you? I just bought a new plugin. Let's go.
Just on a practical level, were you mixing in the sound design pods, and or where was the mix actually happening?
It depended on the episode. There's some I mixed on a stage, and that's been great. We've been mixing animation on a stage, but you have to be really careful because working in the sound design pods actually can work to your advantage because it's more representative of how a lot of people will hear it. So the 10th episode actually was mixed in a sound pod. Yeah, it was mixed in a sound pod, and that actually helped because it was big and it kept it from getting too big. And it's one of the loudest episodes, even in terms of like, you know, the loudness standards of television. We pushed it as hard as we could to make it as aggressive as it could be without, you know, being overpowering.
I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I love those sound design pods, but I will always remember the day that George Lucas called me and said, "Can you come over to my office?" And I walked over and he had blueprints of the tech building out on his desk. And he said, "I'm going to complicate your life." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm going to build 9 new small sound design rooms. We're going to call them pods." And I said, "Great. This is exactly like, you know, we want to go into do more television work. Like this will be great for this." And he said, "But I'm going to put them on this side of the building and I'm going to shear off the side of the hill and build the new sound design pod wing over into what is now the hill." And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, we're a sound company. Like, that's going to take a year and a half, pile drivers, shearing the side of the hill off. And so I said to George, "Well, can't we eat into the parking lot? We'll build them behind the scoring stage, or maybe on the other side of the building out towards the creek." And George just looked at me like I had 2 heads. And he said, "The tech building is lopsided and it needs to be corrected."
Interesting.
Wow.
And I said, and that's the story of why the pods are on that side of the building.
Because it's aesthetically perfect as well to add them. Yeah,
there you go.
That's right, because it was left heavy. Now when you look at it from the lake, it's like a perfectly symmetrical building now. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what.
Oh my God.
That was his point. So, and you know, when George said the building's lopsided, it needs to be corrected. That's when I realized that we were gonna have a very painful year and a half or so while all that construction went on.
I love those pods. That was like 2008. I think those got added. Those I've mixed in almost, I think, every single one of them at this point. You know, they're constantly booked. They sound great.
We had a fun time naming them too. That was a big joy.
Yeah. I'm in the Hitchcock pod. Yeah.
I know that you guys love to put Star Wars Easter eggs in the track. Any little delights you want to point our audience to today before we wrap up?
You know, David, I just realized I don't think we put in our Easter egg into we put our Easter egg into every Star Wars project since the Disney acquisition, but we didn't put it in our own show.
Right. So Sam and I have this ongoing gag since The Force Awakens, which is an homage to the original Star Wars, where the 2 stormtroopers on the Death Star are saying, "Hey, did you hear about those new T-16s?
Yeah, some of the other guys are telling me about that. I think it's quite a thing to see.
What was that?
That's nothing. Outgassing. Don't worry about it.
And then Obi-Wan sneaks off. So we have done versions of that, and this is all Matt Wood's scheming behind the scenes, which is just so great. He thinks it's hilarious. And so when we did The Force Awakens, we were all I'm here on the Disney lot now, so we were here, at the Disney lot, 25 actors. It's like theater camp doing loop group on The Force Awakens. This was 11 years ago, right? And he goes, "I need two stormtroopers to just have a conversation there over in the background." And Sam and I just look at each other and we both stand up, no script. And Sam goes, "Yeah, hear about those T-17s?" Like he revved the version of the speeder.
The T-16s were in A New Hope. These are the T-17s.
These are new.
Yeah. And I was like, "Yeah, I hear they're a great improvement." And he goes, "Yeah, that's what they tell you."
No, they're not. They're terrible.
They're not. And that's in the movie. It's in the subtitles of the movie.
Fantastic.
It's in the
That is
so
fantastic.
then there are 2 knucklehead stormtroopers walking on the beach in Rogue One. Fast forward 1 year later, 5 movies in 5 years, right? So now it's Rogue One. And I'm not even back at Skywalker yet. I'm just voice acting in LA and like getting called in by Matt and thrilled to be there. We're all just huge nerds. And I can't believe they're letting us do this. All right, we need 2 actors to be these 2 stormtroopers
walking on the beach.
Sam and I look at each other again, don't say a word to each other, no script. And I said, and Sam goes,
"No, you started. You kicked.
No, you said, "Did you hear the news?" You started.
"Oh, did you hear the news?"
Yeah, and I said, "Yeah, I heard the T-15s are being made obsolete."
And I say, "Oh boy, it's about time for that."
Dead. And then just dead.
And then they get killed
by
Chirrut.
Yeah, exactly. A moment later.
The idea
Last Jedi,
being
same thing. Solo, same thing. Rise of Skywalker, same thing.
every revision, the odd revisions are pieces of junk, but then they nail it on the even revisions, but then they switch right back to an odd revision. They nailed it on the 16s. They should have stopped there, but no, they had to go on to the 17s, which are junk. The 15s were junk. And we have a whole lineage. You go in Solo, they're in the foxhole, or they're in the trenches, and be like, the T-15s are down, the T-15s are down. Oh, we walk from here, and they're just like, so we don't know quite what the equipment is. It could be a speeder of some sort, or
we think it's a speeder.
I think it might be a speeder. I mean, the T-16 Skyhopper is a thing, but I think this is a different thing. I don't think they're flying around Skyhoppers.
This is like a VT, whatever.
It occurred to me only now that we've literally have that in every TV show and movie, some version of that, some link in the chain of the drama that these stormtroopers live, and we didn't put it in Shadowlord. I don't know what, like we were busy, I guess.
It's like the Wilhelm. All traditions have to die at some point.
Well, I did use one part of the Wilhelm in this, and it's been retired. Like we retired it, but I tried to mask it so you didn't know it was a Wilhelm, but I was out of screams, and I just was like, well, here, on a stormtrooper that gets shot in the face and flies off screen left, you can see if you can find it. But Sam, one Easter egg is that Sam and I do play a shocking amount of stormtroopers.
A shocking amount.
In not only this show, but in Star Wars, even Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, go see it. It opened today. And someone asked me, is the T-16, 17 gag in there? And I'm not being cheeky when I say I honestly don't remember if we did it. But so to not answer your question, that's not in there.
That's even better. Yeah, but
there are other things. I think I recorded the waterfall at Disney California Adventure at one point, and that ended up being a waterfall in the grotto in the 7th episode. I recorded. Sam's in a lot of stuff. I've told this story before, but he gave me a bunch of screams of his that I wanted to put over the opening logo. That's the other thing, is that Sam would just. And poor Brad, I'm like, Brad, I'm sorry, Sam's coming over to the house. I'm just going to record him.
Do it.
He's going to chase this fight. And he does. And like, he's literally right here next to me because I have a shotgun set up and I've got headphones on, and he's like sweating and screaming his way through the 10th episode. And I'm like, this is great. And then, he gave me this file of screams, which one does on a Tuesday. I'm like, can you give me a bunch of screams? And Sam just was like, sure, let me go in the booth. And
here's the Tuesday edition. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the Tuesday edition. Gives me like 15 amazing screams. I choose one and I cut it into the opening logo in each episode. But then when I was working on the 3rd episode, I was like, I had this idea of just Dopplering his voice into some of the swings because of the heightened look of the art of the show, because of what the music was doing, because I was throwing his voice around everywhere in Dolby Atmos. I thought, well, what happens if I Doppler his screams and I cut that into the saber, and his voice sounded great. So oftentimes in the show, when Maul is sort of dominant in the story, you'll hear that mixed in, that sound into the show. That's probably the biggest Easter egg. There is a scream Easter egg that I'm sworn to secrecy about until like 2030, but we'll have to come back.
We should talk with Matt. Maybe we can break the news of that finally on the Dolby podcast.
Oh, wow.
He's the guy, but that's in this show as well.
That's amazing. So this actually teed up my very last question for you guys, which is you were all Star Wars fans before you became creators of the stories and stewards of these characters. So just on an emotional level for you all, what's it like kind of living, like getting to work in this world and living in this thing that was, so important for you guys as kids? You kind of touched on it in that last question, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
My mom took my brother and I to see Empire Strikes Back when I was 5 years old. I've been around for a while. And I've told that story before, but literally that changed my brother and my life. It changed our lives. Every little bit of allowance or money we had went to buying Kenner figures. Every single thing we did went to staging these grand battles. We'd choose, you're buying this figure, I'm buying that figure, so we could get as many as we could, which was just a meager amount. And it's been our whole lives ever since. My brother and I stay in touch all the time. He always asks me questions and I can't answer anything. But he said something recently. This kind of sums it up for me, because I'm just the luckiest person. This is a dream job. Getting to work with these guys, getting to talk to you today, getting to work with our team is a blessing. It's an honor. It's a privilege. It really is. And my brother told me he watched the finale of Shadow Lord And he called me up right away, and he's okay. I gotta find time. I gotta talk to my brother. And he said, "This show is incredible." And he told me the action felt like those action figure battles we used to stage when we were kids, and it was the greatest compliment of all time. It was so cool.
For me, Star Wars came out before I have memory of seeing it. I mean, and so to me, it's synonymous with everything that I love about film, which is such an interesting medium because it's everything that I love about opera or musical theater. It's everything that I love about storytelling, but it's more than that because you have the ability to have expression of point of view through photography, through editing, through, how the director's eye basically. And so it contains everything I love, and it's boundless. It's a boundless way to tell stories. It just seems to keep, like Maul is a great example. Who would have thought that this character would end up having such a rich background and story to tell? And for me, I have a very similar story with Brad. I'll just say that in my lifetime, it has been what the Western was for decades and decades to moviegoers. It is in my mind synonymous with cinema. So it was like a singular goal that I had when I was interested in all of these arts was how Star Wars changed everything from, in my lifetime almost 50 years ago. And so getting a chance to work on it is more than a privilege, and it's a tremendous responsibility that I feel because it's bigger than any of us. It will keep going long after I'm working on it, and I hope I just get to see it.
For me, I came out the same year Star Wars came out, so I was born quoting the movies. I take it pretty seriously. I mean, our producer, Athena Portillo, had to remind me, and sometimes people have to remind me to enjoy myself a little bit here and there. I mean, which we have, look, in the records and stuff, that's automatically fun, right? We're doing weird stuff, and that's always fun. But as soon as I click out of that mode, my brain goes back to work on the problem of like, okay, what have we not seen or heard from this character? Like what would be new? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And, Brad will tell you that even if I'm coming in for a few pickup lines, I really want to talk about it. Like, is there an opportunity here? Should there be a new thing we're bringing in? Should we do this? Should we do that? So yes, there are friends of mine that have to remind me that it's like, do you maybe want to enjoy the fact that this show is on TV right now? And I, and I do, when given that permission, I do enjoy it because I'm a giant fan and I'm a fan of the people that I work with and their abilities. So yes, it's tremendously meaningful to me. And, I'm glad that people enjoyed season 1. Yeah.
What you said about enjoying it, this is kind of just a last quote from Athena Portillo, one of her endless bits of wisdom. When the season 1 finale was airing, she kind of said to all of us, pause, take some time, enjoy this. These moments are what we work for. And it's important to remind yourself of that. Let the pressure down for a second, and just try and sit back and enjoy it. And those are wise words because it fuels you for what's coming next and the work ahead.
That is amazing. Guys, this has been so much fun. Thank you for taking the time. I know we went way long, but it was great to talk with you. That was a blast. I really appreciate you guys taking the time and coming on the Dolby Podcast to talk about this amazing show. Many thanks to Sam, David, and Brad for joining us on the podcast today. And an extra special thanks to our good friends at Skywalker Sound, Lucasfilm, and Disney for helping us put the conversation together and for providing those excellent clips from the show. Be sure to check out Star Wars Maul Shadow Lord on Disney Plus and absolutely stunning Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. All episodes in season 1 are out now, and it was just announced that they're already hard at work on season 2. We'll have links to the series, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.